Trump wants Greenland, but does he know that this strategy is pushing the world into a trade war? And this could cost you when buying a car. Tensions are rising, and the ripple effects might make things more expensive for everyday consumers.
We need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time.
Trump is making waves again by reproposing the idea of buying Greenland. With its rich resources and strategic location, he believes it's a steal for U.S. national security. But this story is not as simple as he thinks. Greenland and Denmark have responded strongly.
Dear President Trump, listen very carefully. Greenland has been part of the Danish kingdom for 800 years. It's an integrated part of our country. It is not for sale.
And it's not just Greenland. Europe, especially Germany and France, have sided with Denmark and strongly opposed the idea. This is not just a territorial dispute, but a struggle over sovereignty and the right to self-determination. So, how does this affect you? It's the US-EU trade war. Trump has bluntly accused the EU of unfair trade practices, claiming that millions of European cars flood US roads, while American cars face numerous barriers to entering the European market. With this move, Trump is not only pushing for higher tariffs on European cars, but also threatening major car manufacturers like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes, forcing them to reconsider their expansion plans in the US. But Europe is not backing down easily. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, has declared that the EU will retaliate strongly if tariffs are imposed. German and French leaders, including Chancellor Olaf Scholz and President Emmanuel Macron, have stated that they cannot accept such a trade imbalance. If a tariff war occurs, you might end up paying more when buying a car. Car prices will rise, and if you're looking to buy a Tesla electric car, this will directly impact you. The crisis doesn't stop at the trade war. Tesla, the leader in the electric vehicle industry, is now facing a new storm. Denmark, once one of Tesla's key markets in Europe, has made Musk headache as the country's pension funds collectively pull out of Tesla. The reason? Tesla's stance against unions and its refusal to sign collective bargaining agreements with workers. Funds like Pension Denmark and Akademiker Pension, with billions of dollars in assets, have lost patience with Tesla and decided to remove the company from their investment portfolios. This not only affects Tesla's image, but also fuels growing public dissatisfaction with the company's labor policies. On top of that, strikes across Northern Europe, especially in Denmark, have blocked Tesla vehicles, escalating tensions between Tesla and labor unions in Europe. And so, we are faced with an undeniable truth. Tesla, once a symbol of innovation, is now facing a crisis. In Germany, the largest electric car market in Europe, Tesla's sales dropped by 76% in just February 2025. Meanwhile, the electric vehicle market as a whole saw a 30% growth. What's the reason? Tesla is losing the consumer trust, and this is not because their cars are bad, but because of labor issues and the increasing competition from European car manufacturers. Especially German consumers, a nation known for their love of brands like Mercedes and BMW, are now turning their backs on Tesla. A recent survey shows that up to 94% of Germans no longer want to buy a Tesla. This proves that the rise of European electric car makers like Volkswagen and Renault is slowly reclaiming Tesla's market share. And it's not just that. Elon Musk's increasing involvement in European politics, especially his support for the far-right AfD party in Germany, is further eroding Tesla's public trust.
Frankly, too much of a focus on past guilt, and we need to move beyond that. Children should not be guilty of the sins of their parents.
So, what do you think? Are you willing to pay more for a Tesla car in the future? But don't rush to conclusions, because the next developments will be even more surprising. Is Canada quietly cutting ties with the US? Nuclear submarines, radar systems, and a chilling message from Ottawa: $60 billion in submarines, $6 billion in radar. A $19 billion F-35 deal on the edge of collapse. One of America's closest allies is quietly stepping out of its shadow. A firm message from Ottawa. The US-Canada relationship is deeply fractured. But this time, it's not about tariffs or immigration policies. It's about nuclear submarines, long-range radar systems, and a total rethinking of national defense strategy without relying on the United States. Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, a former governor of the Bank of England, declared, "We cannot and should not entrust our national defense to anyone else." This statement wasn't meant to provoke. It was a clear, calculated signal to Washington at a time when trust between the two countries is at its lowest in decades. Nuclear submarines not made in USA. Earlier this month, the French nuclear-powered submarine FS Tourville docked in Halifax, Nova Scotia, just 300 miles from the US border. But this wasn't a diplomatic visit. It was a live demonstration of France's latest naval technology for Canadian defense officials. Canada is now preparing to replace its aging submarine fleet in a modernization plan worth 60 billion Canadian dollars, roughly 42 billion USD. They plan to acquire between 6 and 12 nuclear-powered submarines, specifically for long-duration operations in the Arctic, where competition for control is intensifying. In the past, major arms deals like this almost always went to American companies. This time, France is leading. Backed by its Barracuda-class submarine program and a strengthening defense partnership with Ottawa, long-range radar, choosing Australia over the US. Shortly after, Canada announced a major investment, 6 billion Canadian dollars, into the Journe radar system, developed in Australia. Journe is an over-the-horizon radar capable of detecting aircraft and ships up to 3,000 kilometers away by bouncing radio waves off the ionosphere, covering the vast Arctic region in real time. What's striking is this. Canada bypassed all the US defense giants. No Lockheed Martin, no Raytheon, no Northrop Grumman. Why? Because Canada no longer trusts American defense consistency. The Arctic is too critical to leave in the hands of uncertain alliances. Canada wants sovereign surveillance free of foreign pressure, even from its southern neighbor. F-35 deal under review. Then came the bombshell. Canada is now reconsidering its $19 billion contract to buy 88 F-35 fighter jets from the US. The agreement was signed in 2023, and Canada has only paid for the first 16 units so far. But now, the government is reviewing the entire deal and may switch suppliers. Defense Minister Bill Blair called it a necessary strategic decision to protect Canadian sovereignty. But analysts are calling it what it really is: the strongest warning Canada has sent to the Pentagon in over 30 years. NATO allies are watching, and this shift isn't isolated. Just weeks ago, Portugal canceled its own F-35 procurement, citing unpredictable US foreign policy as a key risk for NATO unity. Portuguese Defense Minister Nuno Melo made it clear, we must rethink our reliance on a partner whose positions change too quickly. And that's the heart of the issue. Can a unified defense system survive when its central pillar becomes volatile and erratic? A post-NORAD era? For decades, NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, was a symbol of unshakable trust between Canada and the US. But behind closed doors, Ottawa is quietly building alternative systems, from Australian radar to French submarines and more European tech contracts. Canada is not just diversifying suppliers, it's restructuring its entire defense ecosystem, piece by piece. This is not just procurement, it's a strategic realignment of historic proportions. Stay tuned to see how Europe, Asia, and Washington respond next. A tariff decision could change the future of the US-Canada strategic relationship. Canada is entering a decisive phase, and what will be the direction of its defense and economic strategies? Tense trade relations. US. Canada. Entering a testing phase. The 25% tariffs on steel and 10% tariffs on aluminum imposed by the US in 2018 caused significant damage to Canada's industries, with the country's economy losing about $2.5 billion annually. However, rather than accepting defeat, Canada took strong retaliatory measures, including imposing tariffs on US goods such as whiskey and steel products. Future of trade. While the trade war shows no signs of ending, Canada recognizes the need to seek new international partners, especially in light of the unpredictable policies from the US. Canada signs defense deal with Australia. Significant move. At the end of 2023, Canada signed a contract worth up to 6 billion Canadian dollars to purchase long-range radar systems from Australia. Known as the Journe radar, this system will help Canada enhance its surveillance capabilities in the Arctic, an area of increasing strategic importance due to factors such as climate change and rising military activity from Russia. Why Australia? The Journe radar system can detect airborne targets at distances of up to 3,000 kilometers, allowing Canada to protect vast and inaccessible regions without relying on US systems. reducing dependence on the U.S. The long-term strategy. As the relationship between the two countries became increasingly strained, Canada realized it could no longer rely on the U.S., especially given the unpredictability of U.S. policies aimed at protecting its national interests. To mitigate risks, Canada began seeking more reliable international partners to protect its interests. Additional information. Since 2023, Canada has signed defense and trade agreements with the European Union and the Southeast Asia region, with the value of these agreements totaling $7 billion. The Arctic, a strategic region, strategic importance. Canada's Arctic region is increasingly becoming a focal point of importance, not only because of its rich natural resources, but also due to the growing risk of military conflict with other nations, particularly Russia. The Canadian government is focusing on enhancing defense capabilities in this region to protect national sovereignty. As global interest in the Arctic's energy resources intensifies, the competition for access to these resources is likely to grow. Canada's strategic posture will play a key role in ensuring stability and deterring adversaries in the region. With rising global tensions and new technologies emerging, the Arctic may soon become a critical front in the future of international security. Future forecast. Increasing surveillance capabilities. In the Arctic will be one of Canada's key priorities in the coming years, especially as climate change makes the region a hot spot for resource competition and geopolitical influence. As new shipping routes open up and access to untapped resources grows, Canada will need to ensure it can protect its interests in the face of rising global pressures. Strengthening international partnerships and enhancing defense infrastructure will be critical in maintaining stability and securing Canada's strategic position in the Arctic. Important strategic shifts for Canada. Decisive move. The defense contract with Australia is not just an important step in reducing dependence on the U.S., but also a clear message that Canada is willing to seek new partners to protect its national interests. This move could reshape Canada's foreign and defense strategy for many years to come. Strategic shift. This strategic pivot reflects a significant change in how Canada views global partners, moving away from reliance on the U.S. in defense and economic matters. These changes may shape the future of the entire region. Don't miss the next analysis in the video.
Breaking overnight, President Trump enacting sweeping new tariffs on steel and aluminum, 25%. Europeans are retaliating in a major way.
Will the trade relationship between the U.S., EU, and Canada collapse? Trump's re-imposition of tariffs has prompted the EU and Canada to decide on a strong response. Where will this tension lead? President Donald Trump, famous for his protectionist policies, has once again criticized the European Union. Why? According to him, the EU's unfair trade practices and the global overcapacity in production have harmed domestic industries. As a result, Trump has decided to reimpose a 25% tariff on steel and a 10% tariff on aluminum imports from the EU. This decision aims to protect America's strategic industries, but it also comes as a shock to EU countries, especially when the EU has always seen this as a move to protect U.S. national security.
It'll be 25%. Generally speaking, and that'll be on cars and all other things. And European Union is a different case than Canada.
Additionally, Trump continues to criticize the EU for its digital services tax measures, particularly adjustments targeting major U.S. tech companies like Apple and Meta. This adds another blow to the already complicated relationship between these trading partners. Faced with Trump's tariff policies, the EU is not sitting idly by. The European Union has decided to impose retaliatory measures, with tariffs amounting to up to $28 billion on U.S. goods. However, the EU's goal is not just to respond, but also to hit products from key states controlled by the Republican Party. The main items affected include agricultural products, such as soybeans from Louisiana, beef and poultry from Nebraska and Kansas. Consumer goods, cars, and luxury items are also on the target list. Clearly, the EU is choosing to apply pressure on America's politically sensitive areas to force the Trump administration to reconsider its tariff policies.
Die Zollbeschlüsse der USA für falsch. Und wir werden darauf angemessen und schnell reagieren. Die Vorschläge der Kommission werden wir jetzt prüfen. Dazu stehen wir in engem Kontakt mit der Kommission und den anderen Mitgliedstaaten.
It's not just the EU. Canada is also in the mix. with retaliatory tariffs amounting to 29.8 billion Canadian dollars, around 20.7 billion US dollars. Canada is primarily targeting steel and aluminum, the products it exports the most to the US. This will seriously impact the steel, aluminum, and automobile industries in the US, industries that rely heavily on supply from Canada. In addition, these measures will affect consumer goods and automobile manufacturing industries in the US, which are already struggling to compete with foreign producers. How will the US administration respond when its traditional partners, like Canada, ramp up retaliatory actions like this? Despite the serious trade tensions, the EU and Canada continue to maintain their long-standing strategic relationships. Especially in the context of reducing reliance on energy from Russia, the EU has sought opportunities to collaborate with Canada to export energy to the European market. This is not only an opportunity for Canada, but also a long-term strategy for the EU to ensure stability in energy supply. Canada, a country rich in mineral resources, is working together with the EU in this field, which not only helps Canada boost exports, but also helps the EU reduce reliance on suppliers from unstable countries. Undoubtedly, the tensions between the US, EU, and Canada are a crucial factor shaping the global economic order in the coming years. If the transatlantic relationship continues to escalate, it could change not just the US economy, but also the distribution of global influence. Stay tuned for the next updates in the video, as we will dive deeper into these impacts and explore what may happen in the future. In February 2025, the US government shocked global markets by imposing a steep 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada, igniting a trade conflict unlike anything seen before. With over 80% of Mexico's exports directed toward the US, the response from Mexico was not only swift, but also strategic. And at the center of the storm, the auto industry, which accounts for 27% of Mexico's export value, now stands at serious risk. It all began when the US administration tightened trade policies with major partners, aiming to protect domestic manufacturing and increase border control. But Mexico is not a minor player. The country is the top supplier of goods to the US, and its production network is deeply intertwined with the North American economy. As soon as the tariffs were announced, Mexico's markets went into shock. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum didn't hold back, declaring, "We will not accept this imposition." To reinforce her stance, Sheinbaum led a massive protest at Zocalo Square in Mexico City. Tens of thousands of people waved Mexican flags and chanted, "Mexico deserves respect." But Mexico's response wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. The Mexican government quickly engaged in diplomatic efforts to limit the fallout from the new tariffs. What followed was a high-stakes game of political and economic maneuvering that's still unfolding. Under intense pressure from businesses and the public, Mexico avoided an immediate escalation by turning to negotiation. Within weeks, President Sheinbaum met directly with the White House. The result? A temporary reprieve. The U.S. agreed to delay tariffs on goods covered under the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, until April 2nd. Mexico celebrated this as a win, but not a complete one. The U.S. government refused to lift tariffs on steel and aluminum, two critical materials for the auto industry. That decision has left North American automakers scrambling to adjust. Ford, GM, and Stellantis quickly raised alarms that rising production costs could lead to higher car prices and potential factory closures. The question now: how much damage can the industry absorb before it breaks? If you're planning to buy a new car soon, you might want to think twice. Ford has warned that tariffs could push the price of an F-150 truck up by as much as $12,000. GM and Stellantis have suggested they may need to reduce production or even shut down some plants to manage rising costs. Why the chaos? It comes down to the supply chain. The North American auto industry relies on an incredibly complex production network. Some auto parts cross the US-Mexico border up to 8 times before a car is completed. Every crossing under the new tariff means an extra cost, and that cost will be passed on to consumers. Electric vehicles, EVs, aren't immune either. Batteries, sensors, and electric motors, many sourced from Mexico, are about to get a lot more expensive. That's bad news for an industry that's already struggling to meet demand for affordable EVs. And it doesn't stop there. The tariffs have created a domino effect that's shaking the entire economy. As soon as the tariffs were announced, the financial markets took a hit. The Dow Jones dropped over 700 points in a matter of days. Meanwhile, the Mexican peso weakened by 5% against the US dollar, driving up domestic prices and adding pressure on Mexico's already fragile economy. But Mexico is not standing still. The Mexican government is aggressively pursuing new trade deals with Brazil, China, and other South American countries to reduce dependence on the US market. These moves could permanently alter trade flows across the Americas. Mexico has also hit back with retaliatory tariffs on key US agricultural exports. Corn, soybeans, and avocados, major US exports to Mexico, are now subject to steep Mexican tariffs. This is a major blow to farmers in Texas and California, who are already grappling with rising costs and uncertain market conditions. This conflict is far from over. The temporary tariff suspension under USMCA will expire on April 2nd, and if no resolution is reached, the full 25% tariffs will take effect across all sectors. Will Mexico and the US find common ground, or are we headed toward a full-scale trade war? One thing is certain: the future of North America's auto industry and the broader economy is hanging in the balance. Stay tuned.